In 1893, Scottish footballer Patrick William Groves was transferred from West Bromwich Albion to Aston Villa for the groundbreaking fee of 100 English pounds. Although it sounds like pennies by today's standards, even accounting for inflation, it's only around 16k pounds. It was the most expensive football transfer at the time. But of course, throughout the years, this amount got exponentially higher, with the most expensive transfer so far being Neymar's move from Barcelona to Paris Saint-Germain in 2017 for £200 million. If we plot those figures, the older records basically disappear. Recent numbers are just that much bigger. So to actually see what's going on over the years, we need to switch the y-axis to a logarithmic scale. And by doing so, we see something interesting. The first 16 records seem to form a straight line, suggesting a steady exponential increase. Then there is a gap of a few years, and the line continues with a similar rate of growth. The gap, of course, includes the years during World War II. And I guess football transfers weren't exactly a priority at the time. But it's still interesting that there was a complete freeze, and then just a few years later, the exact same trend continued. The big question, of course, is what would have happened if there was no World War II, at least when it comes to football transfers. If we assume that the same growth rate continued for every new record, we can then extend the initial trend line all the way to the latest record transfer. And by doing so, we can argue that if World War II never happened, Neymar's transfer would have cost £500 million. And that transfer was 8 years ago. If a new record were broken this year, based on the same growth rate, it would have to reach around £1.3 billion. That's insane. I came across this fascinating graph in Oliver Johnson's book Number Crunch, 12 Ways Numbers Make Sense of the World. And that got me thinking, can I find other similar graphs where growth was momentarily interrupted by World War II? Unfortunately, unlike football, we can't really build a similar graph for other sports, because most of them don't use transfers the same way football does. Instead, they rely on direct contracts with the players or trades. And even when transfer fees have been paid between teams, the data hasn't been consistently recorded, which makes it really hard to build a similar graph. But I did find something else that's kind of similar, just not as pronounced as the previous example. This is the number of estimated scientific publications per year. We can again see two distinct trend lines. The difference here is that the second one starts in 1940, not after the end of World War II. Still, a drop is expected as the war had already started by this point. But it could also be a statistical anomaly. At the same time, 1930 might be the anomaly, and the whole graph could actually represent a steady, uninterrupted growth. As you can see, we don't have enough data points to draw any concrete conclusions. But if we assume that the first 4 points form a consistent trend line, then we can argue that if World War II never happened, we would have 55% more scientific publications today than we actually do. I don't know, what do you think? I found one more graph that has at least two distinct growth rates, but this time the change isn't related to World War II. This is the range of radio transmissions over the years. In this case, the change in the growth rate is due to technological advances in the early 1960s. I'm curious to see if you can find better examples. Hopefully something as clear as the first graph we explored. It doesn't have to be about World War II, any kind of interruption would do. Speaking of interruptions, I interrupt this video to kindly ask you to like it, if you actually did, and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.